Margaret clutched the worn quilt tighter, the thin cotton offering little comfort against the chill that seemed to seep from the floorboards. Beside her, Thomas slept soundly, his rhythmic snores a stark contrast to the hammering of her heart. The old house, a Victorian relic they'd inherited from a distant relative, creaked and groaned in the dead of night, each sound a fresh jolt of adrenaline. It had begun subtly, a floorboard sighing in the hallway. Now, weeks into their stay, the symphony of the night had grown more elaborate. Walls groaned, doors rasped open on their own, and the most unsettling of all, a slow, deliberate creak that seemed to originate from the attic, directly above their bedroom. Margaret squeezed her eyes shut, willing herself to ignore the sound. But the silence that followed only amplified her fear. When the creak returned, it was closer, followed by a soft thud. Her breath hitched in her throat. "Thomas," she whispered, nudging him. He stirred, muttering incoherently before falling silent again. Frustration bubbled within her. How could he sleep through this? This wasn't a drafty house, this was something else. Determined to investigate, Margaret slipped out of bed, her bare feet silent on the cold floor. Moonlight cast long, skeletal shadows through the gaps in the curtains. Taking a deep breath, she grabbed a heavy brass candlestick from the dresser, her only weapon against whatever lurked in the attic. The stairs leading up were narrow and dusty. Each creak under her weight felt magnified in the darkness. Reaching the attic door, she hesitated. The air here held a stale, heavy quality, thick with the scent of neglect and something else, a metallic tang that tugged at the edges of her memory. With trembling fingers, she gripped the rusted doorknob. It wouldn't budge. Panic clawed at her throat. Then, from within, a soft, scraping sound. Someone, or something, was on the other side. Terror spurred her into action. She slammed her shoulder against the door, the brass candlestick clattering to the floor with a deafening clang. The scraping sound ceased. A tense silence followed, broken only by her ragged gasps. Suddenly, a cold gust of wind whipped through the room, extinguishing the flickering moonlight filtering through the attic window. Margaret stumbled back, fear choking her scream. A low, guttural growl echoed through the darkness, so close it sent shivers down her spine. She fumbled for the doorknob again, her heart a frantic drum against her ribs. This time, the door swung open with an ear-splitting screech. A figure materialized before her, shrouded in impenetrable darkness. It was tall and gaunt, its arms outstretched, fingers scraping against the walls. Margaret screamed, a primal sound ripped from her very core. She didn't wait to see more, she turned and fled. The creaking stairs a terrifying symphony beneath her pounding feet. Bursting into the bedroom, she slammed the door shut and threw herself against it, her back scraping against the rough wood. Thomas was awake now, blinking in confusion. "Margaret? What's wrong?" She could barely force the words out. "The attic. Something's up there." He rushed to her side, gathering her into a hug. "Calm down, love. There's nothing there." But even as he spoke, they both heard it, the slow, deliberate creak from above, followed by a soft thud, closer this time. Thomas's eyes widened in realization. Panic gave way to a grim determination. He grabbed a poker from the fireplace, the metal glinting in the faint moonlight. Together, they braced themselves against the door, their backs a solid wall against the unseen horror on the other side. The creaking grew louder, accompanied by a scratching sound, like claws dragging against wood. The doorknob rattled, then a sickening thud resonated as something heavy slammed against the barrier. Margaret shut her eyes, tears pricking her eyelids. This couldn't be real. It had to be a nightmare, but the reality was far worse. The attacks on the door continued throughout the night, unrelenting, like a predator stalking its prey. Exhaustion set in, a heavy weight that threatened to pull them under. Just as dawn began to paint the sky with soft hues of orange and pink, the attack ceased. A heavy silence descended, broken only by their ragged breaths. Margaret and Thomas collapsed onto the bed, fear etched on their faces. The terror of the night hung thick in the air. A suffocating presence. However, they were alive. For now, days turned into weeks, each night a test of their sanity. The creaking never truly stopped, but the attacks remained confined to the attic door. They slept in fits and starts, their nerves frayed too.